I'm gonna quick run and grab my laptop, and because we will start. Oh, interesting. Is my watch wrong or is it wrong?
7 minutes.
Okay, my watch is wrong. All right, I will be right back. Because we will start right at 5.
You bet we will. I'm gonna talk fast so I get through this thing.
That's all. And did I mention there's a student group in here after this?
Yeah.
So they've been really accommodating, really cool about it, but if it happens to them on, there's no questions that I'll just talk to you out in the lobby and we can continue conversations. In the lobby.
Could be the best part.
It usually is. Well, actually, some places.
I'm gonna go say hi to my friend Bill.
Yeah, we're gonna order you.
Yeah, I know I've got fans in my office. Are they 3:33? Oh, then they're in my office. Same pile.
Silencing my cellular telephone so I don't accidentally be embarrassing. We have, I'm just keeping it out for the time because this is the accurate time. My watch is not. That clock is actually accurate, which is great.
One never knows.
It was not accurate last year. It was, I think it was slow last year. And I remember fire crew was not happy, like barging in on us. We were at a little long. Whereas this year, they're a lot more accommodating, a lot more patient. Wow, last one. So far, counted 52.
Thanks for lunch.
Now, do you know, did Leah say she's not going to make it at all? Or just not?
Just not for
I thought she was going to be here for the talk itself. But... Hi.
was the impression I got.
Amen.
Okay.
Amen.
56, 57. Yeah, if she's not here yet, I don't think she's going to be here.
We may
Darn it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 26, 28, 43, 46, 47, 48, 40, 41, 48, 49, 50. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 62, 63, 64, 65. 66, 67, 68. This is good. The microphone's probably picking me up now.
someone online is like, wow, they're doing a great job of teaching counting.
And Katie makes 70. All right, it's 5 o'clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. All right, good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for being here tonight. Really appreciate you showing up in person. For those of you that were able to make it in the room, and I'd like to say thank you to our YouTube audience as well. Hello, thank you for joining us. So you are here today for the final seminar in our spring seminar series titled Voices for Conservation in Wisconsin History. So like I said, this is the final seminar in this series. All of the previous seminars in this series, with the exception of one, are available on our YouTube channel or on the College of Natural Resources YouTube channel. If you'd like to watch those, they are available. Or you could email Wisconsin Center for Wildlife if you have any questions, just at wcw@uwsp.edu. So before we get started and introduce our speaker, I'm going to first introduce myself. My name is Jennifer Summers. I'm the Program Development Specialist with the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife. With the assistance of others, one of the things that I do is organize this seminar series, and we do this every spring. We have a topical seminar series, and so this year we're talking about the history of conservation, specifically in Wisconsin. But I'd like to thank the College of Natural Resources for their contributions to this series, particularly using their YouTube channel, and for their help with promotions and other assistance that they provide. I'd also like to thank our student employees, Jenna Christensen and Leah Rose. Hi, if you guys are out watching on YouTube. They were a very big part of bringing this series together and doing promotions, and their assistance, I couldn't have done it without them, so I am very grateful for their assistance and support. And of course, I'd like to thank our director, Dr. Jason Riddle. He is the director of the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife, and he's the one that approves the funds for this and ultimately approves the project itself. So thank you for all your support, Jason. And then finally, moving on with acknowledgements. This is an important part of every public-facing event that we do. The University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point exists upon land inhabited by the original indigenous people of this area, including the Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and the many other nations and groups that predate colonial borders. We acknowledge that with colonization, Native American people have been dispossessed of their lands and irreparably changed by the actions of individuals and institutions. We acknowledge our responsibility to understand and respond to those actions. In partnership with the Native American Center, we commit to working together to honor the past, be intentional in the present, and to build our future with truth. So now I'm going to, Jason Riddle is going to take over, and he's going to introduce our speaker tonight. And so thank you, Jason.
Thank you. Again, I'm Jason. It's great to see so many faces here in the crowd tonight. And for our closing seminar, of course, we wouldn't have this seminar topic without giving a heads up to Aldo Leopold. And as soon as we knew we were going to have Aldo as one of our focal folks, we knew we wanted to reach out to Curt for this one because his name is like synonymous now with Leopold in our state for all the best reasons. So Curt is a conservation biologist, environmental historian, and writer who lives here in Wisconsin. And he wears a lot of hats. Senior fellow at the Aldo Leopold Foundation and Center for Humans and Nature, a research associate at the International Crane Foundation, and an adjunct associate professor at UW-Madison. So lots of hats, lots of great credentials, and is known for his writing. He's authored and edited several books, including Aldo Leopold, His Life and Work, The Driftless Reader, and then most recently, We Can Do Better, which is another book that he helped to edit. So join me in welcoming Curt and sit back and prepare for a great evening.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Wisconsin Center for Wildlife. I'm going to talk fast because I know I only have an hour. And I know there's students waiting for another event. So I'm going to be at a higher pitch and faster pace than I normally am. So thank you all. Thank all of you for coming. I'm glad you didn't get hit by any fallen tree branches. Man, you had a storm. Thank you for getting through your sidewalks. Thank you, YouTube people, whoever you are, wherever you are. Thank you for choosing this theme for your series. As one who has a foot in history and a foot in contemporary conservation work, I really appreciate you doing this because not enough of us do it. And you all here at Point have had an opportunity that a lot of students never have, and that is to learn a bit about the history of the fields you're going into. So thank you for doing that. I'm going to launch right into this because time is going to run out fast. It's really appropriate that we're doing this here in the middle of this, right? In the middle of this scene. And it's in the middle, obviously geographically, but it's also in a sense in the middle in terms of the time dimension. And that's what I'll be getting into here. Here's what I'm going to do in the next 40 minutes or so. A few opening words. A little bit of the big picture. You'll see what I mean by that. A lot of talking about before conservation, before that word even became prominent in the way we use it now. A real key moment in this entire arc of history is when, of course, Wisconsin became known nationally and globally for its progressive policies on conservation. Yeah, I'll get to Leopold. He actually doesn't show up all that much when I thought about it. I hope I don't disappoint you, but what I hope to do is show you how Leopold fits in, how he plugs into this history and where he comes along, so that when you read him, maybe you'll read him with a little different angle yourself. And most of you have probably had to read Leopold many times, even before you got to Point, maybe even. And then at the end, I always add a little catch-all at the end to say, I don't know, what am I going to say at the end? And I give it an important word like prospects, okay? I want to mention I'm drawing on a couple essays that I published in a couple books. One done by colleagues actually from all over Wisconsin, the book on the left, which is a great book. Man, I went back and read some of that recently. It was done back, when was that? 2008. Just a fascinating collection of some of our best experts in the state, looking at the processes of ecological change across the Wisconsin landscape. And then back in 2020, in this book that came out of a colleague down in Madison, about the Wisconsin idea. I'll say a few words about that later on, but a lot of what I'm going to talk about draws on these two essays, and I'll provide the references and all, and it'll be recorded so you can find those, and I'm more than happy to provide those publications if you would like to read them. But some opening words. First one is Michelle Nijhuis. Michelle is I think, our leading conservation journalist. She's wonderful. Bring her to point, please. And read her book called Beloved Beasts. It is, in my estimation, the best book on wildlife conservation, history of wildlife conservation of the last generation. Published in 2021. It's easy to forget that the world we live in is far richer thanks to those who found convincing reasons and the required means to provide sanctuary to other species. Great book. I'll just leave it at that. There is a little Aldo here for you. This is not Insane County Almanac. A little more obscure. Conservation viewed in its entirety is the slow and laborious unfolding of a new relationship between people and land. It's one of those Leopold sentences that you can look at it and think about it for about 20 minutes, and you're only starting. He wrote that in 1940. And then finally, Walt Brissett, another member of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame, Red Cliff Ojibwe voice, leader. To understand how my people feel about the earth, you must understand our stories. How we feel about this place comes right out of our stories, how we think of ourselves in this place. Come right out of those stories. If you don't know Walt Brissett's story himself, look it up. He was inducted in the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame 2 years ago. And it reminds us that Leopold's line here, a slow and laborious unfolding of a new relationship, is actually in some ways a rediscovering, reclaiming, and reimagining of much more ancient relationships. But I was putting this together and this quote from Leopold popped into my head. It's one of the weirdest things he ever wrote. There's drama, and this comes from a wonderful essay, again, not Insane County Almanac. This is a brilliant essay. It was delivered as an address in Madison. There's drama in every bush, if you can see it. When enough people know this, we need fear no indifference to the welfare of bushes or birds or soils or trees. We shall then have no need of the word conservation, for we shall have the thing itself. It's a very odd sentence for Aldo Leopold. I wish I could tell you what was going on in his head. But as I thought about that quote, this image kept popping in my head. I gave this title to Jennifer, I don't know, months ago, and I didn't really think about it. And then I realized, oh man, I'm in trouble. Because this is 2 lectures. And then on my drive up from my home this morning, I said, holy cow, this is like an entire class, what I'm trying to do in this lecture. I'm not going to get you through all this. I'm starting here in 1848 when Wisconsin became a state, remembering what Walt Brissett just shared with us. And going through, here's the present, here's Leopold in the middle, and I realize I'm only going to get you in the next 40 minutes to about here, maybe a little bit over here. So if I come back next year, I'll do the rest. But the big picture, this is a series of slides I've been using for quite a while now to try to help us put our arms around the big picture of conservation history. I mentioned Michelle's book. In fact, if you asked me to recommend the best book in the history of conservation, I said, I can't. There isn't one. There is not a good, solid, comprehensive book on the history of conservation. It doesn't exist. It's too complicated a story. And so that's why I've used these slides to try to show that, to illustrate. And to make this work, I want everyone here, all of you, to think of some topic in conservation, or some interest of yours, or some theme, or some scientific study, or something. And we'll see if it works for you. I hope it does. But here's how I try to explain this. Conservation is complex. So I'm going to play out my big Venn diagram of complex conservation for you. The first part is the science. All of you are immersed to one degree or another in some aspect of conservation science. What does that even mean? It means a lot of things. It can mean plant and animal ecology, evolutionary biology, all these fields, all the ologies, up to traditional ecological knowledge, just ancient but new. There's lots of books on the history of science and the history of these fields. Lots of books on the history of ecology. And all of these are constantly changing, all these fields. But conservation, as we know, isn't just science. It intersects, let's say, with how does science get used, how it gets applied in the field. And we can think of all kinds of different things that have been done, techniques and technologies. Reforestation, controlling predators historically, right? Fire suppression, prescribed burning. Oh, wait a minute. That's a good example, right, of change. A technique, a practice was once put out all the fires. Now we say, boy, we need fire back. Oh, and on again. Soil and water conservation, reintroduction. Let's not forget the urban environment, GIS, and all the modern digital technologies. Let's put artificial intelligence up there for the sake of discussion. All of those always evolving. There's books on the history of all this. The science and the practice intersects, though, with the values and frameworks that guide us in the use of those technologies. And we can think of all the different schools of thought and areas of knowledge and concepts and labels and themes that have gone on under the themes of ethics and philosophy. The values that guide the use of the science that also help us think about what science does for us and can't do for us. Let's not forget this, policy. Often the first thing that pops into head is this law or that law. So it could be regulations, it could be public and private lands, endangered species, on and on, right? These are just illustrative. It's complex. And it gets even worse because guess what? All of them interact all the time, right? Think of whatever it is in your head about your topic or theme, right? I don't know what it is, but how does it map there? What's the science of it? What's the values and the ethics? What's the policy on that? And it bounces around. There's no one entry point here. It bounces around. A new scientific finding suggests a new practice that suggests the need for a new policy that says we need more research. On and on it flows. Meanwhile, all of that's contained within this broader circle of our changing society and culture. That's why there's no one book. You have to know all this stuff to even wrap your head around it. And why do I do this? It's, first of all, just to help us have a framework. And I could sit here, I could stop this lecture right now. We could just stare at this for the next 40 minutes maybe. Sometimes I think that's the best way to do this. But what I want to make a point of is that Leopold sits right there in that middle point. He's right there. Leopold has his hands and head in all, and heart in all of this. He's unusual in that way, maybe unique. And I'll come back to that later on. So yeah, it's a big, complex story of conservation. We're all a part of it. And we're all always trying to figure out where we're fit in. What is our part in this? But let's set the stage before conservation, before that word is even used. And when I said set the stage, I think let's go all the way back. Right? Let's go all the way back. Well, it's not all the way. It's just 20,000 years ago, actually. But the great ice sheets, and here we are at the southern border. I live off in the, just inside the driftless area there, the unglaciated part. I'll just draw attention to the fact, of course, that the last phase of glaciation was, in fact, called the Wisconsin Age. That'll come up a little later, too. There's a reason for that. Basically because the glacial features are so prominently on display in Wisconsin's landscape. But it wasn't too long after the glaciers began to recede, melt back, that in fact people came. People came into this place, depending on who you talk to, but at least 12 to 13,000 years ago. If you talk to our Ho-Chunk friends, they have some other thoughts on how long their ancestors have been here. But these stages of the human presence remind us that we didn't have conservation 12,000 years ago. but we had a relationship between people and land, as Leopold would have said. So let's remind ourselves a little bit of some of this. We lost megafauna. The giant beavers and the short-faced bears and the saber-tooths and the mammoths and all that. We still don't know why. There's great debate always about how, when, and why. We have in Wisconsin some of the best actually data and artifacts from that period, including this famous Hebior mammoth from down in Racine County. There was a human role in this. Again, it varies across time and space. We're still researching, and there's always new evidence coming to light and new ideas from our indigenous colleagues about how to understand this. We know that people always express their relationship to land in various ways. These are all from Wisconsin. These are all people in this land recording their inner lives on the land. And in other places, in other ways. Astalon, the Mississippian complex down there, east of Madison, one of the key ancient works of Wisconsin, or of course the proliferation of effigy mounds. Across, we are one of the global centers for this phenomenon. These, as one of my Ho-Chunk friends calls it, these ancient earthworks and artworks on the land. So that gets you up into the Mississippian, but we're getting somewhat closer to the modern. I love this map. This is the Ojibwa conception of the Upper Great Lakes. I love it that it's disorienting. I love that it puts you in a different angle, a different axis, right? And the place names are obviously different. It's a reminder again that there are many ways of seeing this world and understanding it and processing it and living within it and valuing it. And that changes dramatically, of course, at the point of contact. When Jean Nicolet arrives and meets the Ho-Changra at Red Banks on what is now called Green Bay. Jump ahead a century to the distribution of native communities then, middle of the fur trade era, as European and indigenous North American economies and cultures are mixing and moving. These are cultures in movement all the time, just as ours is. And what we again now call Wisconsin became basically a big refugee camp for tribes coming from the east being pushed like dominoes to the west. Jump ahead another century, 1825 last year was a very important year that nobody really cared about, but it was 200 years since these land divisions were worked out in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin. There was hardly a recognition of it, one of the most important events in our history. But this is the division of lands as that point in history. And of course, these are connected to the cessions of land that were part of the acknowledgement that you heard at the beginning. And of course, the contemporary native communities. I'll come back to this map in a little bit here in Wisconsin. If you're at all interested in another speaker, I can recommend to you, if you haven't had Patty here, Patty Lowe. She is retired now from teaching in Madison at Northwestern, and she's just one of our great assets. She is a Bad River Ojibwe member, and these are two books about Wisconsin's native history that I highly recommend. They're basically pitched to people who are just trying to get a basic knowledge. But I especially like this one, in which she points out that in each of these tribal communities there have been expressions and individuals who've carried the lessons of their cultures into modern environmental work. And that's what she does in that second book. And you can learn about these key figures. There's many more. You'll see some individuals, they're all representative, but these are three who are key in the Wisconsin's native history of resistance and persistence and survivance. Chief Buffalo up in the Northwest, Black Hawk, famous for the Black Hawk War in 1832. And then just near me, Yellow Thunder, one of the absolutely key figures in Ho-Chunk history, who led his people back to Wisconsin after they were completely removed or were supposed to be removed. Yellow Thunder had other ideas, and I can recommend Ho-Chunk. I'll get John Greendy here to come and tell you the story of Yellow Thunder. Before Wisconsin was a state, of course, settlement of Europeans was happening already, and the beginning of economic exploitation of resources. The lead mining district in the southwest part of the state, of course, was where the first big mineral boom happens. And it was soon after that that this landmark, literally, moment occurs. I forget the year when this was installed. I'm going to say 1832 or 33. This is a land survey marker. It's way down here. It's on the state line with Illinois. And it sits at the base of this fence post near Hazel Green, Wisconsin. If you walk to that fence post and look at that little marker at the bottom, you'll be at the point from which all of Wisconsin was measured. Every square inch of the state measured from that point all the way up to Lake Superior, all the way across. The land survey, the public land survey, carried out by generations of young surveyors under the direction of the federal government, laying out the grid lines that are so taken for granted, but shape our lives every single day, everything we do. I wrote about that too. I got intrigued by this whole story. But the public land survey gave us this. It had very little regard for natural or cultural features on the land. This is increasingly the famous Man Mound near Baraboo that my buddy Rob and I painted the legs back on. This is an east-west, this is an east-west road, and it follows the land survey line, and happened to cut through the legs of the last remaining human-shaped effigy mound in Wisconsin. Cut them off at the legs. So the land survey allowed for the efficient exploitation of everything, including people. Whether it was the northern forests, now open for logging, the great white pines, of course. Most of you know this story, especially here at Point. Incredible to think how rapidly this happened over just 30 or 40 years after the Civil War. No conservation movement. There's the graph. I call this the peak pine graph, right? From basically the end of the Civil War to the early, here's peak pine about 1890 in northern Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota. There's no forestry yet. To build the farms of the Midwest and towns and cities, ship down the rivers like the Mississippi or down Lake Michigan to Chicago to build the country. Remember that map? Well, most of you know this story, but keep your eyes on the Menominee Forest. Famously, you can see it from space. The Menominee have never clear-cut their forest lands, so you can go back and forth and see it right there. And there's the border. A nice, clean survey line, right? And yet that's what a lot of the forest at the Menominee. Do we have any Menominee in the audience?
But I'm from there.
All right, yeah, Shawano. Yeah. So if you've never been there, organize a field trip, get over there. It's really important, really important. Not just forest, but the survey and all that came with it allowed for the efficient exploitation of wildlife and wetlands and prairies and every other feature of the landscape. It helped to facilitate the extirpation and even extinction of a number of species. These are things that no longer occur in Wisconsin. Relatives that no longer occur in Wisconsin, if you were again speaking with your Ojibwe voice or your Ho-Chunk voice. No conservation movement yet. Passenger pigeons 1914, so that's an exception, as we'll soon learn about. Okay, 1848. Wisconsin becomes a state. State gets a university. They were founded within a couple months of each other. And eventually the University of Madison, of course, becomes the land-grant university under the Morrill Act, 1862. Abraham Lincoln signed it. Creates the land-grant university system. That includes this campus and all of the UW system campuses. It too connected to the exploitation of people and land. This was a key article published just 5 years ago, pointing out how the development of land-grant universities was tied to the exploitation of indigenous landscapes and features and the loss of land among tribal communities. This article has had ripple effects. It has really pointed out how the education system is part of this history so that we can begin to understand and maybe come to some reconciliation in some way. In Madison, if you climb up Bascom Hill, in the middle of campus, you'll see an acknowledgement of the Ho-Chunk presence in the Four Lakes, the Dejope area of Madison. Conservation hasn't shown up, but it's about to. This is John Muir's home lake. This is Ennis Lake. Not too far from here, less than an hour away, if you want to go see where John Muir got his first lessons. John Muir, of course, becomes a student at the University of Wisconsin in 1859, if I remember correctly. John Muir, famous, of course, as probably the most prominent early voice for preservation. And that first label for what conservation does. It preserves things. John Muir becomes associated with that branch of the conservation movement. That's his dorm room, by the way, North Hall, up on Bascom Hill. I always show this in Madison because the students are, what? Yeah, his dorm room was right there. I'm going to have a number of individuals. I'm not going to do the whole thing. I do a much longer lecture that highlights a lot of people, but I'm going to highlight a few of them for particular reasons. And my joke on this is these are all gentlemen with amazingly awesome beards from the 1800s. Wisconsin's first scientist, Increase Lapham. You can read some of his accomplishments here. I'll draw attention to the last one, 1867, the disastrous effects of the destruction of forest trees, now again going on so rapidly in the state of Wisconsin. Drawing attention already to the problems of loss of forests. These are two figures you may not have heard of, but they actually went on to national significance out of Wisconsin. Carl Schurz, a forester. John Wesley Powell, famous for going down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. Actually spent time growing up in southern Wisconsin. And it makes a point that a lot of people came through Wisconsin at this time of exploitation and went on to become national leaders in the emerging conservation movement. Both of these gentlemen were nationally significant figures whose effects we're still feeling. Let's go to Madison for a little bit, because the system as we know it now, the UW system, didn't exist. Madison was pretty much it, right? So let's just pause there. This is an early photo of the west side of campus, the agricultural side of campus, and that's why I highlighted. I wanted to bring in the development of the agricultural side of conservation. John Bascom and the Wisconsin Idea. For those of you, most of you have heard that term, the Wisconsin Idea. Heard it loosely used, maybe it's kind of fuzzy in your head, but it basically means the philosophy that the university serves the people everywhere in the state of Wisconsin. It's not just the campuses. The boundaries of the state are the boundaries of the university, right? Well, Bascom had a lot to do with it. He was the president, but it was under him that the very first training for farmers came about. And these gentlemen are among those who helped turn us into the dairy state. Smith and Henry, these are names that you'll see on buildings in Madison. No beards, but good sideburns and mustaches. Very key people in, again, the conversion toward a more sustainable agriculture system after an early non-sustainable phase of wheat farming exhausted the soils. And it was this fella, F.H. King, one of the most prominent early soil scientists in the country, in Madison, especially this book. This is a classic work in what we would now call sustainable agriculture or regenerative agriculture. So it makes the point that this side of conservation, which isn't preservation, it's not John Muir. This is more about sustainably using resources. The part that becomes associated later on with forestry and Gifford Pinchot, we'll talk about that. One last figure, T.C. Chamberlain. He's one of my favorites. I'd love to do a whole lecture on him someday. He was president of the UW as a state geologist. One of the most important figures in the history of geology in not just Wisconsin, but in the country and the world. He produced a series of the most amazing scientific reports on the geology of Wisconsin. You can find these, I'm sure, in your libraries here. These are key documents. He's the guy who figured out how, when, and why those glaciers happened. He's the one who named it the Wisconsin Age. Hey, you get that prerogative if you study it, right? So this is the Kettle Moraine, of course, that he began to depict. And you don't have to memorize or see these references, but what they point out, these are articles published in the 1890s in which Chamberlain is laying the very foundations of modern climate science. He wasn't alone in that, but he was figuring out the carbon cycle. Incredible. More than 100 years ago, Chamberlain is showing how CO2 circulates. So there we have them. These are some of those gentlemen and others up on the top of Bascom Hill in Madison. Because now we're at the point where the policy enters and conservation becomes a word. The first lectures in forestry in Wisconsin are given on the campus in Madison by this fella. And it's published actually 1898, I think it was, Forestry Conditions in Northern Wisconsin. How do we deal with this? We're just becoming aware of the fact that, oh, white pine is exhaustible. We can deplete these amazing forests that we thought were inexhaustible. Hardwood forest is being reduced by logging, clearing. The pineries are disappearing. Fires assist the destruction of both, besides burning out the swamps, the wetlands. At present, nothing is done either to protect or restock the denuded, cut-over lands. The policy causes a continuous and ever-growing loss to the Commonwealth. Enter Fighting Bob La Follette, Wisconsin's famous progressive political leader who was governor. In the early 20th century, went on to become senator, run for president. Wild man, Fighting Bob. Here's his farm, just south and almost due south of Madison, a little south and west. He was absolutely essential to all of this because he was in office at the time when the science was providing the information and saying we need new policies. Let's not forget his amazing wife, Belle Case La Follette, first woman to get her law degree in Wisconsin. And his partner in all of this, also a force to be reckoned with, and turned Wisconsin into a national leader in conservation. And they are aided in this by the president then, another geologist, Charles Van Hise, who publishes in 1910 this book, The Conservation of Natural Resources in the United States. This is the first textbook in conservation. It comes out of Wisconsin, it comes out of lectures given on campus in Madison. And you can see all these other things he did. In addition to being president, he was involved nationally with Theodore Roosevelt and in fact attended in 1908 the Governor's Conference on Conservation. There's Teddy Roosevelt up front. Gifford Pinchot's in there somewhere, his chief forester and originator of the Forest Service. Here's Van Hise's book from 1910. Seems to me, from the point of the view of not distant future of the human race, the great movement for conservation is more important than all other movements now before the people. Each generation should hold the resources he possesses in trust for the generations to follow. Kind of the basic understanding of conservation. It's dated in many ways, obviously, but the impetus was there. The Wisconsin idea gets formalized and formulated in a book also from this time, 1912, by this fellow named Charles McCarthy. Who wrote the introduction? Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt. Thanks to the movement for genuinely democratic popular government that Senator LaFollette led to overwhelming victory in Wisconsin, that state has become literally a laboratory for wise experimental legislation aiming to secure the social and political betterment of the people. So this was sort of the peak of that wave of progressive political activism in the early 20th century. And it was not partisan and politically divided by party the way it is now. La Follette was a Republican. Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican. Just a few more of these individuals, because I can't give, there's hundreds, literally. That's why you need a whole class long, semester long class to teach it. But I did want to mention the water side of things, right? Burge and Judet, the key figures in the founding of the science of limnology in Wisconsin and nationally, out of the Limnology Center again down in Madison with their field stations up north. And up north looked different then. This became the great question, what would happen to the cut over north? They were focused on the water, so you don't see Burge and Judet back there, and they're not talking so much. They're really trying to figure out the basics of freshwater science. But others were faced with this issue. And the key figure in all of this is an economist, George Wehrwein, another member of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. You can see his plaque out there. He took on the key question, what do you do with millions of acres of denuded, deforested land? What do you do? It's never happened before. We don't know what to do. They had to come up with new policy. It culminates in 1927 with a series of laws, most famously the Forest Crop Law. His line here, conservation involves a deliberate use of restraint in the present in order to leave a supply for future generations. Again, a classic kind of utilitarian definition of conservation. Finally, we get to Aldo. So I could obviously give lectures and lectures on Aldo Leopold. I'm only going to touch on, I want to see where he fits in all this, right? Well, a little perspective. He comes to Wisconsin mid-career. He started in the Southwest in the Forest Service. Moves to Wisconsin in 1924, joins the University of Wisconsin in 1933. And of course, he never saw the book, Sand County Almanac, published. He died. In fact, he never even knew that title. He died before that title was given to this book that has made him a globally significant environmental figure. So I'm just going to highlight three little themes in Leopold's work that kind of serve the purpose of this particular presentation. First, Leopold and education. Think of that big circle of culture that surrounds us. Well, how do you affect your culture? Well, be a teacher. Leopold was an extraordinary teacher of the next generation, not just of scientists and professionals, but of citizens, and he was very keen on this. It was those kids off of farms and kids from Milwaukee or wherever that needed to know how the land worked and how this new science of ecology, this brand new science that nobody heard of, how did that influence how we think of conservation? He was a brilliant teacher. His whole lecture is to be done just, I'd love to do a lecture just with his notes, just for experimenting, you know? Leopold saw the story of the land in simple things like this. This is a typical class handout Leopold would have used for his undergraduates. The history of northern Wisconsin. You know, species coming and going, vegetation changing, habitats evolving. Leopold and restoration. So we talked about John Muir and protection and preservation, right? Kind of one school of conservation. Then there's agriculture and forestry and Gifford Pinchot and those dairy guys about sustainable use. That's the two schools of conservation that have been battling forever. But Leopold and others bring along a third leg of conservation, not just protecting and not just using, hopefully sustainably, restoring. The idea that we can actually actively work with land to restore its health, diversity, beauty. So here he is, you know, Leopold fought fires. He wrote about the evil of fire as a young forester. Well, here he is in some early prescribed burning, bringing prairies back at the Arboretum in Madison. And it was not just a professional project, it was a personal project. Remember that practice part of this big Venn diagram? Leopold is doing this with his own hands, and he's doing it with friends, family, students, colleagues. And then lastly, I'll highlight this third angle. And it's one we don't often think or talk about, but Leopold is an activist involved in public policy, trying to make a difference, using his science, using his ethics, trying to make a difference in the policy arena. There's a whole book, literally a whole book written about Leopold and deer and wolves. It's not new. The controversies over managing Wisconsin's deer herd and how we can and should treat the predators that also depend on the deer. Leopold was in the thick of it in the 1940s. He was pilloried for it, actually. He had to have a pretty thick skin to get through some of the meetings that he was participating in various capacities. Or to choose another thing, he went to the mat for protection of wildlands. He was among the founding members of the Wilderness Society, a nonprofit founded to protect public wilderness lands out west especially, but the Boundary Waters and others. And he makes a defense of his work in this way. An ecologist must either harden his shell, make believe the consequences of science are none of his business, or he must be the doctor who sees the marks of death in a community that believes itself well and does not want to be told otherwise. So Leopold was not first and foremost a political activist, but when he felt called upon, he stepped it up. So there's that big diagram again, right? And we can see that middle spot there where Leopold, as a scientist, as an ethicist, albeit one self-trained basically, as a policymaker, as a practitioner, it's all integrated and interrelated in Leopold's experience, and that's why he could see it in the conservation movement at large. He knew that some of us have a preference for one of these angles, and there are others, of course, and this is not a complete way of thinking about it, but he understood that some people are more oriented in one way or another. They have different cultural and social backgrounds. And so when in his mature work, he began to write about this more in his last few years. He tried to draw on all of that. So I'll finish up here with those four circles, right? Let's just walk through. I just chose a quote for each of them, just again, illustrative. Speaking as a scientist, our job is to harmonize the increasing kit of scientific tools and the increasing recklessness in using them with the shrinking biotas to which they are applied. 1940. Actually, a presidential address to the Wildlife Society. He's saying this. And he used his leadership role and he used his weight to push his fellow professionals in this new field of wildlife, in this case. Leopold speaking as a philosopher. Famous words, we've all read these. A land ethic changes the role of Homo sapiens from conqueror of the land community to plain member and citizen of it. Implies respect for his fellow members and respect for the community as such. I thought of this one on the way up. There's a billboard on the way up to Point here. And it says, it's an ATV billboard. It says, conquer the land. You can see it next time you come north, you'll see that. And I immediately thought of this. So we are still in these mindsets. Leopold as a policymaker. This is from an unpublished manuscript. If America is here to stay, she must have healthy land to live on, for, and by. Hitler's taunt that no democracy uses its land decently, while true of our past, must be proven untrue in years to come. Writing in the midst of World War II. And then again, Leopold is a practitioner. What more delightful avocation than to take a piece of land and by cautious experimentation prove how it works? What more substantial service to conservation than to practice it on one's own land? So Leopold has, again, his fingers in all of this. And he's using these different voices in different arenas of his personal life and activity to kind of find what the story is. So I got you up, I got you through the arc, right? This thing's stuck in my head. I got you up to here. I'm just going to do a couple more. We'll go up to about here. This was the photo taken 3 days ago from the Artemis, right? Went viral right away, of course, for good reason. What an amazing thing. For those of us of a certain age and certain gray hair color, it brought to mind, of course, Earth Day. Our own Gaylord Nelson, father of Earth Day, governor and senator of Wisconsin, speaking, because we're getting close to Earth Day, a couple weeks, right? This is what Gaylord went around the country saying in 1970. There's actually a manuscript that shows these words. Our goal is not just an environment of clean air and water and scenic beauty. The objective is an environment of decency, quality, and mutual respect for all human beings and all living creatures. Man, I had a chance to meet Gaylord a few times, and that man, he was my favorite politician. And there's not many, I don't often use those words. He was a great politician. In the best sense of that word. They do exist. And all of this to say again is, you know, the rest of this story, how we went from no conservation, not even the word, to Leopold helping to rewrite the very definition and content of conservation, not alone, nobody's alone, to where the environmental movement took things and where we are now facing the uncertainties and realities of global change and social change. And that leaves us with that last slide, for which I have no notes and prepared nothing, to see what in the last few minutes comes into my head. This is a photo from Ferry Bluff, one of our great state natural areas along the Wisconsin River near Sauk Prairie. I live about 2 bluffs down the river there. So I was just up here the other day looking for pasque flowers this time of year, and watching turkey vultures flying at eye level, which is very cool. So I don't know, that's maybe where I'll end up. The State Natural Area Program, just to choose another example. We are unique in Wisconsin. We have this amazing system of, what are we up to now? 500 state natural areas in Wisconsin. That was a product of so many of our predecessors thinking of Norman Fassett, right? And how Fassett and Leopold and others in the 1940s conceived of this idea of protecting the best of the best hotspots of biodiversity in the state. So there was real leadership back then, and there always has been, and there will be again, no matter what this current weird moment we're in leaves us. But I guess this is where I always sort of end up, especially in student audiences, talking about the future and saying, if you feel a little anxious about where we are at this point in history, in the big picture of history, there's darn good reasons you should feel anxious, because everything is changing so quickly. It's hard, and we're all disoriented, right? We're all disoriented by the pace and rate and type of changes. This is why history helps, and this is why I'm so glad you again did this series. But kind of the take-home lesson for me has always been history is full of these amazing stories of leadership, and I only touched on them. And it didn't depend on leadership on top. Especially in Wisconsin, it didn't. Leadership is not, my mantra on this is never confuse authority with leadership or power with leadership. We are the leaders. You're looking for leaders, look to the person sitting next to you. That's the leader. We are it. We are it. That's the story of Wisconsin's conservation history in so many ways. Yeah, there were important people, those three guys with big beards. They were very important. But it would never have happened if they hadn't been elected, if they had not had state legislators who created a university system, if the people of the Menominee Nation did not want to keep the Menominee forest for future generations, on and on and on. So we're it. Conservation history depends on us all the time, always has, always will. Thank you very much. We have 6 minutes. Do we do Q&A or what do we do?
Any questions, anyone?
Comments, something new and different? Yes.
What radicalized you? Where did it start?
Soil.
Go on.
Well, you're students, you've taken botany. What's the word radical mean?
Changing from the roots.
From the roots, of pertaining to the roots. So, yeah, to be radical is to be rooted deeply in the soil. How's that? And I make a joke of it, but I'm serious about that. And sometimes I've done a lecture where I say, when was the last time you heard an economist use the word soil? The entire economy depends on it. When was the last time you heard an economist use the word soil? It doesn't happen. So the roots of our radicalism are in the soil itself, and it's amazing now to watch actually one of the most promising developments in conservation. Farmers and other food people devoted to soil health. I'm sure some of you are studying or will study at some point. Concepts of soil health. Years ago, this wasn't even a conversation. Leopold wrote about it. He used the phrase soil sickness back in the 1930s. So this gets you beyond the typical political definitions of what's a radical or a conservative or a progressive or a liberal or whatever, because none of them care about soil. Not enough to make it a real thing in the political arena. So I say that, and what I mean by, so what I and jokingly almost say is, to be radical is to be really thinking about the entire structure of our communities. And in Leopold's terminology, soil was, well, it's a community. Soils, waters, plants, animals, and people. But we think of it just as people. So that's my answer. I don't know when I got tuned into soil, but I know it's, my garlic is up in my garden as of last week, so it's good.
Oh, we've
We got one question.
Oh, question from,
The internet, so we're gonna.
And then we'll have to take
Then we take
other
it
questions
outside.
to the lobby.
We have one question from the live chat. What was Leopold's relationship with Sig Olson?
Leopold's relationship with Sigurd Olson, whose birthday was just yesterday, I think, if I saw my memes correctly. Sig Olson was almost a student of Aldo Leopold. They knew each other. Sig Olson was a half generation younger. Sig Olson, especially after doing his very early study on wolves, he did one of the most important first studies on wolf ecology. This got him into Leopold's kind of radar screen, right? And they knew each other and liked each other. Sig Olson ended up going down to Illinois and studying with, I think, Victor Shelford, another very important early ecologist. But they stayed in the same circles. And later on, especially when the issue of protecting the boundary waters became a national concern, Leopold and others, including Olson, were working to do that through the Wilderness Society, whose picture I showed. So they did know each other, and Aldo recognized him as a kind of an up-and-coming talent. He was hoping he would come to Madison, but for various reasons, Olson went on to Illinois.
questions, we're gonna go ahead and move out into the lobby.
Yeah.
So we could let the other group in here, but.
The good discussion goes on outside, we know.